It's 4:08, so let's start. So welcome everyone. I think all the important people are here, right? So great. So let's get started. So warm welcome to all of you. So this is a panel on careers in the healthcare sector. So so the sponsors for this event are the Center for Management of Health Services, which I have run, as well as the Alumni Initiative Healthcare Special Interest Group. Right? So this is a group of our alumni who are involved in the healthcare sector, who are sponsoring this event. So the genesis of this event is really a discussion that we had, a very important discussion, and I'm going to introduce Shailesh and Professor Joshi, right? Is to about introducing students to the idea of working in the healthcare sector. And it's I think readily apparent that one of the big challenges is that when you're a student here, you don't necessarily have all the information, right, on making career choices. Not just in terms of your internship or your first job, but also what might happen after that, right? So careers are long-term things; they take decades long. And how do you
recording in progress?
How do you think about your career in a slightly more holistic way is an important task to have, right? So that's the, I think, genesis of this conversation, is the genesis of why we're having this event. And so what we did is to invite some of the most eminent alumni who are participating in the healthcare sector to come in and share their perspectives with us. This is very valuable, right? One of the things that I discovered as CMHS chair is how much contribution our alumni have made in this sector, and it is quite immense. If you look at all, virtually lots of the top healthcare companies in India, many of them are led by our alumni, and so having had that now, I think, combined decades and decades of experience is very valuable resource for the students to draw on. And so, it's incredibly, it's my privilege to sort of welcome our panelists. So let me just read out in the sequence that is there on this sheet of paper. So I'm going to first introduce Dr. Shailesh. So he's a PGP class of 1984. I think the last time you came to campus was during your 25th reunion. So welcome back after a long time. So Shailesh claims that most of you were not born. But he is at Goldman Sachs Asset Management in the healthcare and pharmaceuticals investment space, right? So there's also Dr. Manchanda. He was here very recently. He was here for my health economics class in March. So so Om is a very dedicated alum. He comes to campus repeatedly to interact with students. As he is managing director of Dr. Lal's Pathlabs. Which is, I think, most familiar to students because most of you have been customers of this, right? So in that sense, you have had very direct experience, unfortunately, especially during the COVID era, as customers of Dr. Lal's Pathlabs. When I was talking to Om, one of the interesting things that came out is that he doesn't have, his initial career was at Hindustan Lever, right? And he says that I got my second MBA at Hindustan Lever. I learned how the world works, right? And that was the path that he took eventually to running Dr. Lal's Pathlabs, right? So very interesting perspectives that we've shared so far. And so welcome to IIMA, and we look forward to hearing from you, right? Meenakshi Nevatia is the managing director of Stryker. So the reason why I thought that Meenakshi would be so great to have here is because she admitted that when she was a PGP student, right, and so that's in '94, right? She got an offer from McKinsey, and she took it because that's what she did. You didn't have to think about it, and so there was very little planning that happened, in terms of taking the career option. But then, of course, after a long career at McKinsey, and then at Novartis, she is now managing director at Stryker. So there is this path that you took, and I'm very curious to learn. From saying that you didn't think about why you took your first job offer to how you think about careers today and your own career today. Really love to hear more about that, right? So, and finally, we have Devdutt Marathe. So Devdutt is a PGP 2009, and he till day before yesterday, Last Thursday. He was a partner at Apex Partners, investing, so private equity investments in the healthcare space. And now he's going to take a sabbatical before you join Brookfield, right? I think, so again, just this afternoon I learned the process through which they arrived at the healthcare space. That he was in private equity, and one afternoon he learned that he's going to invest more in healthcare. So that's how his career took shape. I think it's common thread that I often hear is that there's this role for serendipity for many folks who get into the healthcare space. But I hope that some of these transitions are also better informed, right? And perhaps even planned. And I would like to learn more about that, about what is the particularly germane in parts of information and germane aspects of planning that you would advise to do something. Right? So that is the panel that we have. We also want to introduce some of our other members who are sitting here. So there's Sudarshan Jain, who is eminent alum, and Ulas Joshi. Ulas, along with Professor Arvind Sahai, also offers a course on medtech, right? Healthcare technology and products, right? And as an elective. And so watch out for that course. It's a fascinating course. And so all of you should think about taking the course. And finally, there's Professor Vishwanath Kumbhi, for whom this PGPX classroom is like his native village, right? So I think all of you, many of you know him. And so he's been teaching firms and markets in PGPX program, and will soon be teaching game theory to the PGP students, right? So as well as PGPX. So there's no escaping Professor Vishwanath. So with having said that, I'm just curious if some of you want to take a first stab. I think the way we're going to plan this is I can ask you a few questions just to get started, but many students are here, and this is not a quiet bunch. You're unusually quiet so far. So if you have questions, by all means, raise your hand and question will be. So this is better format as a Q&A so that you are able to ask your more salient questions right off the bat. Let me first just sort of ask Meenakshi to help us through that process. Think a little bit about how did you go from being a generalist to now a specialist, perhaps then a specialist and a generalist and a specialist today? So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so firstly, good afternoon everybody, great pleasure to be here. And I just want to build on what Tarun said. I've been now 18 years in the healthcare sector and I'm not going anywhere. So even though I started randomly, I'm now here and very firmly here, and I thought it's good to share some of the experience of being in this sector. Right? So I think your specific question was, what made me start as a generalist and then end up in this place. And to be honest, I really do feel like in my time, which seems ages back, like 94, I was getting into placement in 1993. And at that point, honestly, it was a day zero obsession. I think probably still is a day zero obsession, but there was this day zero obsession. And there were a few companies that had just started in India, McKinsey was one of them. And they used to pick very few students. And they used to be a day zero company. And it was kind of seen as if you get picked by McKinsey, that's great. And that was it. There was not much more thought. I didn't know much. I had come straight from college, a 3-year college. I did economics, into IIMA, completely green. And it was just the idea of joining some place where I can figure out what I want to do. It wasn't that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to join some place which is known to be a great place, and so I can figure myself out. And now that I figured myself out, that's how I landed in healthcare. So, I think at some point we discussed pros and cons of generalist versus specialist or specialist versus generalist. And I can argue on both sides of the house with equal passion, frankly, because I think there is no real right answer. It depends what each of us want to do, and sometimes you just go with it and you see it works for you, right? But I think in my case, my interest in healthcare started very much within McKinsey. I started my career doing lots of things, but mainly banking, financial institutions. Nurse was one of my first clients in textiles, so it was really all over the place. And then I did my first pharma project that was with an Indian company. And I really enjoyed it. And why did I enjoy it? Because I think there were 2 or 3 reasons. I think intellectually, it's really as challenging as any other industry, whether it's banking, whether it's FMCG, the intellectual challenge is absolutely there in spades, so no question. If you're looking for an intellectual challenge, you will get it in healthcare, no question. I think the second thing was that the opportunity in our country for healthcare change and revolution is massive. So to be working in that small cog in the wheel where you can potentially be making a huge difference, there's something good at the end of it. My husband was in PNG and we used to often joke that you're selling soaps, I'm selling drugs. It's like completely different. So I'm not saying FMCG is bad, but there was something very noble. You wake up in the morning and you feel good about the job that you're doing. So I think there was a bit of that as well. And I think thirdly was just that even from a career perspective, because the industry is growing so rapidly, because it's quite a fast-changing industry, there was a lot of potential to do a lot of stuff, but it is also highly regulated. So you learn how to grow fast in a very constrained space, and that's a different challenge in itself, right? So I'm not saying no challenge is bad or good, So each of you have to make your choice. But to me, these three aspects of the job really made it interesting. It was intellectually challenging. It was about really high growth, but in a very constrained space when it comes to regulations, when it comes to what can or cannot be done, when it comes to the way we can advertise, the claims we can make, everything is controlled. So within that control space, you need to find a way to really stand out, and that is a very different challenge. And I think third, and probably overriding all of this is kind of where what you're doing, and it's a good feeling, right? So that's kind of how I landed. And then I've pretty much firmly been in that point. My healthcare assignments within McKinsey started maybe around I joined in '94. I started in India, then I went to Singapore and US. And US is where I started doing a lot more healthcare work. And there, I suppose it was just more advanced, it was more mature, so I learned a lot, and then I just stuck with it. So from about 98, 99, this is the sector I've kind of lived and breathed and grown up in. So I suppose I feel like this is the only sector I can really credibly talk about. But the sector itself is huge, right? So I think that's the other piece that we as a panel want to give you some perspective in. Healthcare is not pharma, although it's a very big part of it. Healthcare, now I'm leading a medical technology company, and honestly, I don't mean to say that pharma wasn't interesting, but I'm finding this medical technology space extremely interesting because the life cycle of our products is very short. Patents don't mean anything, so you really need to constantly keep innovating yourself. Our playing field is the operating theater. So most of my products from my company Stryker are in the operating theater. So you see the impact of your products live, real time. There's no running away from it. If a surgery goes wrong, it's us. If a surgery goes right, it's us. My team is helping in surgery, they're scrubbing. So it's very real, it's right there, and there is no patent protecting us, right? So you need to constantly keep innovating. And the quality of innovation, the quality of technology, it's very, very advanced. We have a lot of AI that goes into all our technology. There's a lot of science that goes into it. For example, we're selling a camera where everything inside lights up so the surgeon can make sure that they don't cut any vessel that they don't want to. So the technology is quite advanced and it's very real. So suddenly now I've discovered in the last 3 years this other aspect of healthcare after working for 18 years in the sector that I find now very interesting, right? So I'm back again like a student of the industry. Then there is the insurance sector, which in India is going to go through the roof. And and that is a perfect blend of healthcare and financial services. And again, if you're interested there, that's a third piece. And then there is, which includes PE of course, but and then there is the diagnostics. And I think all of us, the respect for diagnostics sector in the last 3 years has transformed. As I got older, the importance of diagnostics became more important. And through COVID, I think we are where we are as a country because the diagnostic industry was able to keep up with it, right? So I think it's just been, I suppose I'll stop here, but I think I would say 3 messages. Firstly, everything we say is our personal experience, so you need to take from it what you do. But I would definitely want to say as a sector, it is very exciting, a lot of potential. There's a lot of different aspects in our sector, so you can really get a lot of growth. And while it might feel like it's a giant elephant that moves at a very slow speed, I think it's because the impact can be so huge, right? So anything that has huge impact needs some time to change. But at a company by company level, there is huge room for intellectual challenge, agility, working closely with customers, seeing the impact and all of that stuff. And I think for all of these reasons, I'm still very much in the sector after 18 years. and loving it, and every day learning something very new and exciting about my own sector. So that's a very quick journey of my last 25 years.
Great. So then, the follow-up question, I think, and I don't know if you want to answer it, but obviously no, is the nature of skills, right? So whenever I talk to students, it's like, yeah, this is, like, am I a physician? Do I have, like, for MBBS folks who come to IIMA, yes, obviously they're going to get it, right? But the reverse is also incorrect, that you don't need to have a medical background to succeed in the sector. So I think a little bit of this perspective of like what sort of skills you need and how much background you need to get to succeed versus the other kinds of skills. So I think that perspective.
Maybe I think I'll probably answer the questions that I have some thoughts to communicate. Since this session is all about managing careers and we're all sharing our experience, I just, what I've learned in the last sort of 32 years of my corporate experience is there are three things which we have to get right as you embark on your career. One is get the industry you want to be in, because your career success will actually depend on industry success. You can be the most talented person around, but if the industry is not doing well, you probably won't win. So once you zero down on the industry that you want to be in, then you must decide which company you want to work for in that industry. Because it's extremely important, because it's not that every company will be a winner eventually. And also other governance standards and everything else, quality of management, all that stuff you must do. And third is finally, what is the role you're going to play in that industry? Whether you are a marketing person or a sales person, etc. I think the most important piece which I find is getting the timing right. I have seen a lot of players, a lot of people walking into company when it's at peak. They thought that they are the ones now going to start. Yes, they are most visible guy, but eventually they are also the most disappointed people because they probably see the fall of the industry. You've seen telecom, you've seen fall of Nokia and all these, and I can on I can go on and tell you where people actually reached when the industry was peak. Company also was at peak because it was visible and you wanted to be there, and suddenly you saw the decline. I think healthcare is such a sweet spot right now. Is where if you enter now, and let me tell you, 25 years from now, you will be the heroes. In fact, I'm sure Professor Tarun must be studying to find out who are the 10 or 15 odd guys I can find to speak to this class, and he still eventually comes to our names only. Because there are a handful of us, especially on the provider side. There's on the pharma side, there's still a lot of people. On the provider side, I mean hospitals and diagnostics. So I think that's the important thing. Now let me do a bit of a selling for healthcare. Why healthcare is becoming so exciting now? Why it wasn't there maybe 10 years back or 15 years back? I'm keeping pharma side, because I think probably Sudarshan and others can speak about that. I'm talking about provider side of healthcare. The reason for that is this industry is highly fragmented and very unorganized. And I'm sure in our own personal space, when you go to a hospital, you just find who is the owner. Yes, there is Dr. So-and-so. And how many number of beds? Maybe 200 beds maximum. And that guy is a rock star in maybe 10-kilometer area. They are all stars in their own domain. But they won't have chain of hospitals. This whole idea of chain of labs and chain of hospitals is a very recent idea. What has really driven this is actually an entrepreneurship and the capital that started coming into the sector. Let's look at Dr. Lal's story. I came into the sector not because of healthcare. I came in because a venture fund put in money, and that fund clearly knew that this company can only scale up with a professional manager around, rather than the, let's say, promoter or owner sort of format. It was a precondition. And I'm seeing that this happened with other lab chains also. Slowly that I saw in even healthcare as well. Max Healthcare, you look at Fortis. Most of these people who are sitting at the top, ownership is not medical ownership. Or if it was medical ownership, the private equity coming in actually forced them to actually have professional management. now what is happening is that scale is building in this, especially on the provider side. It is getting aggregated. There is a tremendous amount of pressure in the country of 1.3 billion people that will make healthcare accessible and affordable. And COVID actually has further triggered. It actually shown us the gap that exists in this country. You will be surprised when this COVID came. There were only 25 cities in this country where they had a testing facility for COVID. When this COVID lockdown was announced on March 2020. Then the whole struggle started for all of us that how do we really expand capacity? And I think today, if I'm not mistaken, number in private is about 2,000 labs. Right? And this is for such a large country, 2,000 is just nothing. So this country actually needs lots and lots of infrastructure, and scale has to fall in place. And as Professor has been saying, I've been saying since yesterday, scale solution is not a medical. Solution to scale is the management scale. You really need to understand how a distributed infra. We are a company of 250 labs, 5,000 collection centers, 10,000 pickup points, 5,000 employees. We just have 250 doctors. Now, pathologist actually does the pathology work, right? They don't run business. As somebody rightly said, pilots fly planes, but they don't run airlines. So, but if you're only one unit company, yes, without a management skill you can manage it. But when you are running a scaled operation, you require a management skill. I think that's where all of you can play a big role. The second thing that I'm observing in healthcare is, like, since I work for Hindustan Unilever in marketing, we always say right the center is product. Then there's a huge circle around this of a brand. Product is just one P out of the 4 Ps, right, that we all know. Similarly, here also in healthcare, right at the center so far has been the disease. You manage a disease. There's another circle which revolved around this, which was the patient, and you take care of the patient. I think now there's another bigger circle which is evolving, is of a consumer. So it's actually becoming consumer healthcare. All of us, even if we are not maybe ill, but we still want to take care of our health. So that means to me, as a diagnostic company, every consumer, patient or not patient, is still my customer. You must have seen a lot of these preventive health checkups, etc. coming in, a lot of predictive stuff. All that is really happening. So this whole space of healthcare is moving from a focus on disease to consumer. Which means, technically speaking, it is like FMCG. FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, mostly we need every day, so is our healthcare. And that is what is also happening. So many of us carrying these Fitbits and watches and watching our steps, etc., food habits, weight management. All this is part of healthcare management. So I think these two areas are happening today, and that is really making healthcare very exciting. And being a management problem, I think you are very pleased. Sorry, I don't know whether I actually forgot the question that you asked.
I think the time is here. I think partly addressed that. I think you partly addressed that issue. That you don't need to be a doctor, right, to be in the healthcare system, or you don't have to have medical clinical training
I think that's
because of the importance of the
I think that's a
skill.
great question. I did work for a company in between for about 3 years in my time. And I learned a very interesting concept of two in a box. I actually asked this question, I used to ask this question, they had two CEOs, they used to call two in a box. One guy was a science test, a technical person, another person was a commercial person. I think healthcare also will undergo that transition, where probably you still need to have two in a box format. To my mind, to be a successful business leader, somebody who doesn't have any medical background, probably two in a box is idea is good. I think it's also important to pick up some domain knowledge, otherwise you probably will be out of place. Healthcare is not the only sector, there are many sectors where you need to pick up domain knowledge. And I think that will come probably with time and in a career of 25, 30 years, will probably pick up some of these things that this one is time. And also, it's not that you are going to be OT and patients, etc. It's about there are many parts of other businesses. Let's say Pathlabs. While our facade is medical company, but actually you will be surprised that inside we are not a medical company. 80% of my time actually goes on resolving issues which are logistics. 80% of our samples actually move from point of collection to point of testing. It can be from 10 meters to 3,000 kilometers. Why 3,000? We actually get samples from Africa also. So this entire chain, supply chain has to be temperature regulated. You can't really mix up so many processes. Sample before it actually hits the machine, it changes 5 times. And you know how our ML systems are. At every changeover, there is a possibility of error. So, and also we are an IT company. What is our output? Our output is just a few digits that we give on a report, right? It's all numbers, it's all data, it's all about IT and technology. So all these areas are not related to, and somebody who has under a position to build a large scale organization, you can't build a company scale of Microsoft. So I don't think that is required. I don't think that's it. Otherwise I wouldn't be scale
I think Om answered it. I would just add one thing. Whichever industry you are going to join, you need to know your product really well. I don't think we can run away from that side. So even in my consulting days, whatever other, I was in banking or financial institutions, you need to really understand your product. I think that's what you need to do in healthcare as well. So whichever, I think that's a universal truth. In order to really succeed in the industry you want to be in, you have to really know your product, you have to really know how your product is used, and you have to really know your competition. I don't think there's any running away from that in any industry. So I think just see healthcare just like that. It's just that to learn the product, it may take a little bit of a different knowledge. To learn a banking product may take a different knowledge. But I don't think it's anything more complicated than that. But that's just one additional piece I want to add to what
Awesome. So I actually have, can I just turn the question a little bit for Deepak? Right? Is that, it's fine to say that, there's lots you can do to prepare, perhaps some things you don't need to prepare. But if you're like, a young, relatively early career person, you're saying that this is I get what the panel is saying, this is a sunrise sector, this is what I want to work towards. But let's think about what I can do to prepare today, right? And so there are many students over here, their first years, their second years, I see PGPX, right? And, of course, my answer is that take my course, take Ulas's course, right? But you can do more, and how do you develop the domain knowledge? And I do see some, physicians in the class, but what else could you be doing in order to do?
I mean, the cost sounding quite generic, right? I think, to my mind, the answer is to be curious about stuff that happens around us. I mean, COVID has been a perfect example of everyone now knows RT-PCR, because it's not even like right? But just being curious about things that happen around us and wanting to learn more. And the industry is like a fine Swiss watch, right? There's lots of intermediate pieces and they all work together in a certain way. And once in a while, one of those pieces comes loose and then you have a problem. But I think understanding the industry is actually a very interesting intellectual challenge as well. And from our position, understanding companies, how they operate in that industry, is fascinating to hear from our people as well. I mean, my answer would be just as a student or as a leader question, just be curious, just learn to resolve as much as you can. And fundamentally, I think as Meenakshi and Kumar also said, right, this is not, in our jobs, we don't need to hold a scalpel or sutra quotation, but what we do need to be able to do is take decisions on a daily basis. So just being prepared to make decisions and sort of see those decisions and be able to communicate those things that we learn in business school. I think is probably the most important tool that we had as a person going from financial sector to healthcare.
So, Shailesh, love to get your perspective. So there's one I want to hear about your story and hear about your perspective. But there's one question which sort of bothers me, right? And this is perhaps, as professors, it bothers us because we want to deal with it. And I suspect it doesn't bother students as much because they've all been successful all throughout their life, right? So they're now at IIMA, and obviously everyone here has been super successful all their life. But the professors have had their ups and downs, right? And when you have a long career, right, you're going to have your ups. The big movements, big payouts, big paychecks, big promotions, big transitions, and then sometimes you also have challenging moments, right? And it's either for yourself, or it's for your employees, or for your family, and that's tough to deal with, right?
Very well said. And let me just sort of add to what has been said. And to some extent, in this group of panelists, I am the oldest. So you might think that I might feel a little bit embarrassed to be speaking to people who were not even born when I started in my IIMA first class, way back 40 years ago. But let me tell you, friends, one very important thing. I'm on the wrong side of 60. I hate to tell my age, but I'm on the wrong side of 60. But I'm as energetic as ever. It's only because I'm in healthcare. It just doesn't let you go old. I was traveling day before yesterday from a long distance. It was very difficult for me to make it to Hyderabad because I'm jet lagged, but I didn't want to miss it, to be with you. It's important for me because I knew that you all are here because you care. And way back when I started this journey in 1982, I remember a little bit of story you were mentioning about when you have how do you manage your highs and lows. We're very fortunate to get into the institute, just like all of you, and I was one of those biology students, so did not have any exposure to mathematics. And worst of all, I was born and brought up, not worst of all, I just love it, but I was born and brought up in Gujarat, so I never studied in English medium. I could speak a full sentence in English, and it was one of those very, very tough moments in my life. So, we used to look at Vastrapur building from a small little place and look at that wonderful place, and I wish I could one day come and study here. But that was the only dream one had, but didn't have the capacity to even really think of appearing for a CAT and going through this whole process. But cut the long story short, I did this whole thing. Some people helped me to prepare myself, and lo and behold, I got the admission. And of course, there's one little story. I don't know how many of you know Professor Barua, who used to be mathematics and statistics manager. He used to be your director a few years ago. So Professor Barua was in the interview panel, and I went inside the interview panel, and before I went in, outside, by that time I had acquired a girlfriend, who incidentally eventually became my wife. So she was with me in Vastrapur, here very much in this campus, and just before entering the interview, she asked me, Shailesh, what is the square root of 0.9? I said, 0.3. Shailesh, I have a little bit of knowledge. It's 0.93. I said, how do we do more than 0.9? Anyway, so we just talked, we had a joke and everything else, and I go inside. There were just 3-4 guys looking, very tough looking fellows, interviewing me and saying, why do you want to, you are a veterinarian, why do you want to come into management school? We never had a veterinarian in our school, everything happened. I was pretty confident. And this Professor Barua, those of you who know, very tough guy, sitting in one corner, he just looked at me and said, how good are you in maths? I said, very good. Confidence is very important. So I said, next thing, very good. So next thing he asked me, what is the square root of 0.9? 0.93. I will answer. I said, I knew the answer. But how many people who were far more clever and much more savvy in maths should have been in this institute? And I got it. Now just one question. Now that is one part of it. But having come in, I know you all, those of you who are in PGP1, I really bless you all, because that PGP1 first 6 months killed me. Because there was this production operations management, there was this economics, there was this whole finance. None of these things ever made sense to me. Remember, Gujarati medium guy up to first year BSc. So very difficult to understand everything else. But what I want to really emphasize here, and I'm not going to give you a very big story, but the important part is that by the time the second semester got over, 6 months, I had 2 Ds. Now, I don't know the system is, what is the system here now, but those days you get 4 Ds or 2 Fs, you are out of the institute. So now, same thing. So I had 2 Ds and 2 more Dhurandhar subjects were still coming. The maths was not leaving me, so there's going to be another NSM class and there was something else. So I knew writing on the wall. So I said, look, I was quite a good guy in working in National Dairy Development Board for a very good cost, working for farmers. Here I was struggling, not able to even, complete ego-busting experience. And by the time I had married, and then my wife was in Anand, I was here, it was a miserable situation. So one weekend she came here and I said, look, before they sack me, I would like to leave very honestly. So I would like to get out of this place, tell everybody I was an IIMA on the wall, I left it. And I said, let me just go back to NDDB and do what I want to do. I really don't want to have this tension of doing it. And I was almost throwing in my toy. Now at that time, this 20-year-old girl, I was 27 by then, and she was, she came and told me, since Shailesh, perfectly okay. But let's do one thing. If they sack you from here, you can't go back to Anand because you were a hero there, you were doing so well, and now you don't want in front of all of them to be looking so bad. So let's do one thing. Just put in your best efforts. If you get another couple of Ds or 1 F, no worries. You leave this institute, we will go to a village in Gujarat. You treat the animals, I will teach the school children. And we will build our own little world amongst between us. Can we do this? And I looked at her and I said, hey, is that okay with you? He said, yeah, of course. All that matters is you and I are together. And as long as we can really build something which we enjoy doing it, why not take a chance and just give it a shot? It works, it doesn't work, we'll get out. Well, friends, that support, and I think you will need this in your career as you go along. It could be a mentor, it could be a friend, it could be a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, parents, but you need at the right time somebody to tell you that they do believe that there is a future and that bad times don't remain bad times all the time. And I can only tell you that I never got another D, and I did pass out in 1984. If it makes sense to you, I actually topped the institute at that time. But the key message here is that in the career as in personal life, it will never be a straight line. I can tell you that today, at my age, I am so busy. Healthcare will keep you busy. There is so much to be done. And when I work with you, people like you, age doesn't come into it. As much as you try to find out and get some learning from all the knocks that I have taken, I learn a lot from you. You have so much to offer. Your clarity of thought, which I never had. Your knowledge of technological skills that you bring in on the table. The way in which you communicate, your ability to decide what you want to do. These are all invaluable traits that you have. The best part in healthcare is that every day, as was mentioned by my fellow panelists, you want to go back home and sleep with a feeling that I was part of a solution. I made a difference somewhere. Some child who got the vaccine, some child who needed desperately an anti-cancer drug, we were there to meet him. Somewhere we needed a device that helped him to breathe easily. We were there to make that happen. All these aspects are very personal. It's very difficult to describe as a career move. But believe me, friends, I have had about 10 jobs in 2 companies. I only worked for 2 companies. I worked for GlaxoSmithKline for 15 years, 18 years with a French company called Sanofi. And there are 8 to 10 jobs I did within 2 organizations. Never felt bored. And more importantly, as long as you have that humility, that managing success is easy, managing failure is the most important challenge that you will face. One example, and I'll stop. Way back when companies merged, so there was a merger of company between a French company called Sanofi and a German company called Aventis. which was Hut 70s. When they merged in 2004, by that time I was a managing director of Sanofi Synthela, which is a French company, and I was delighted to be the managing director. I thought I would really bring in all the aspiration, dream, and creating a great organization, passionate, wonderful place to work, all that dream with which I had taken the job. 3 years down the line, merger. And merger happened, and there was a French guy who was heading the Ventus Pharma, which was 10 times bigger than Sanofi. At that time, the group decided that the new managing director will be the bigger company's managing director, which is the French guy. And Shailesh, well, you can stay back if you want. So they said, look, we would still like to keep you, but as a commercial director, not as a managing director. So it was an emotion which I had already given up in GlaxoSmithKline. I had taken this job. As a managing director, I was a member of the OPPI, I was everything, and suddenly I was demoted to a position which was much lower. Now, normal common sense for me would say, okay, I'll be there for some time and then I'll see where I can quickly quit and take another position of managing director. As long as you don't keep that ego in your mind and don't think too much of yourself, because after all, it's one life. And if you can really do a job which you enjoy doing it, then positions and designations come in its own way, as long as you don't take those things very seriously in life. And I tell you, there's again, I decided to stick around with that company, get myself entrenched into the new organization, learning about other people, big company, their brands, their products, and everything else, joining hands with men and women working in their organization. Guess what? A year later, all came from Paris and said, we want you to take over the managing director, we are pulling back the French expat. Next 18 years, I have not looked back, continue to be the MD of the company. What I'm trying to say is that this industry, and for that matter, any industry you choose, you really need to have patience. That's not something that's following. You can job hop if you're not happy, but do please select somebody as a mentor. You know, I mean, I was very fortunate to work in companies where I had bosses who actually gave me values which were so dear to me. I would never ever compromise to work, and those things I could then, translate into my day-to-day working. So, friends, I think there is enormous scope. We can talk about all the other things that are happening. Maybe in the future, I'll tell a little bit about why healthcare is it more than ever. In the past, it used to be that you must be a pharmacy graduate, you must be a medical doctor, or you must be one of those biology students in order to succeed in this industry. No longer. My successor, and this is where I like, my successor in Sanofi was 20 years in Unilever. He was a brand manager for all those FMCG products that you can think of. And he then became the chief commercial officer of Airtel. Zero experience in healthcare. And guess what? He was headhunted by me, brought him to Sanofi, and became one of the most successful healthcare professionals. As long as you have learnability, as was mentioned, learn, constantly, we have that passion to do things. It's not looking back.
I want to welcome online Chirag and Adatia. So Chirag was supposed to be here, but because of healthcare reasons, he could not. Right? But very happy that you can join us online. Chirag is at McKinsey, and we missed talking to you this whole afternoon. Missed you during lunch, and but hopefully, one of the perspectives is that of a consultant in the healthcare sector. So many students will be heading to consulting firms, right? It's other kinds of professional services kind of background, almost all right off the bat, or and so love to get your perspective both on the sector in India, Chirag, but also how you see, the folks in consulting, other kinds of professional services, engaging with the sector and so your perspective, as well as of course I'd love to hear your journey as well. And how did you? I know you're a doctor, right? But how did you end up doing what you do today? And what are your views on that?
Sure. Thank you, Professor, and apologies to everyone. I think all the students, all the professors, fellow panelists. So suddenly the health took a turn for the down and didn't want to risk everyone being in person over there. So apologies for that. Look, I was actually class of 2006, 2008, and I actually joined McKinsey straight after being with them for now 14 years. As Prof mentioned, I'm a medical doctor and had no intention to do something else. In fact, I remember first day when we joined the campus, someone asked, "What is your dream company?" I had not even heard of McKinsey. Forget McKinsey, I'm not even sure what consulting is. But I think my big takeaway is life takes its own turn. You can't overplan for it. So I was doing my medicine, planning to go to US for doing a post graduation. I was enjoying what I was doing, but I think had a personal event because of which I had to shell my plans. Lost my father pretty early, and I think that really made me think that US is not there. India healthcare, for all of its medical profession, is a very, very hierarchical profession. And actually, then I met a friend and from US had come, and what I realized is most people outside of India use undergraduation not as a career choice, but just to discover what they like and what they dislike. I think unfortunately in India, we decide undergrad course in 11th, 10th class, and they say this is a career. Of course, that's not true for engineers, but for most of the people like doctors, like chartered accountants, decide much earlier. And then I really thought that's not the case. I think what I've learned is invaluable, but why don't I really go and explore? And I think what better than MBA? I think things fell in place, got through Ahmedabad. And again, I think what I ensured was for first 2 years, I tried to unlearn healthcare as much as possible. So I did my internship with HUL. I was selling soap in Thane, taking local every day. And a lot of batchmates used to call me saying, how's life as MBA? And I could not answer them. I was, by the way, the lowest paid summer intern in entire campus. I was given 15,000 salary, no accommodation in Bombay, but learned tremendously, right? And not looking back at all, amazing learning experience. Joined McKinsey, and I also ensured in McKinsey, also ensured for first 2 years I did not do any healthcare work at all. Because I thought, it's given me a chance, let me go and explore what's happening in technology, consumer, finance, financial services, real estate. And I think again, by chance, ended up joining one study, moved to London, serving NHS over there. And I think it quickly figured out very quickly that healthcare where the heart is. I think since last almost 12 years, healthcare is the only thing I've done in McKinsey. And I think as I think Shailesh mentioned, I think this is where which keeps you going. And again, and I think one thing is very clear: all jobs are hard, and if you don't have the passion, if you don't enjoy what you really do, there is no fun in it. And life is too short to do something which you don't enjoy. So very, very quickly figured out that healthcare is where my passion is, and right now work across the entire value chain, right? So pharma companies, hospitals, medtech, public health. But once you have that realization, the scope is immense. And again, I think healthcare is, compared to many other sectors, healthcare is, I would say, still few years behind in terms of whole advancement. I think now we're seeing a lot of digitalization happening. But compared to any industry, compared to FMCG, healthcare has been traditionally a bit laggard. And therefore, at least what I'm seeing right now is an amazing amount of things you can do over here. I think Om, you mentioned that your company is called healthcare, but it's not healthcare. And that's the perspective which really the sector needs, right? Really getting a perspective from non-healthcare and really helping and make the sector a lot more efficient and grow faster is what at least excites me. And again, I think in the journey, I have served various types of clients, but I think one of the most gratifying experience has been working with a large donor foundation. And I remember this was one of the earliest things we did, really advocating to the government to include rotavirus vaccine in the universal immunization program. And for those who know, rotavirus vaccine actually prevents child diarrhea, which used to be the #1 killer of children in India. And that single vaccine actually saves 2 million lives every year. And whenever now I go back and talk to medical calls friends that you're not saving lives, and I always recall this example, right? That the impact you can have, not being a doctor, but still having such a large scale impact, saving lives is just very, very gratifying. And this is what you can do in a management, right? Take decisions, shape initiatives, build stuff which can impact many, many lives at a much larger scale, and really touching each one of them personally. And all of you, a lot of us saw that personally in COVID, what impact health can have in people's lives. So I also feel, I think, I genuinely believe healthcare is a tipping point right now. I think especially post-COVID, if you compare to any developed economy, our GDP spend on healthcare is 4% of GDP. Most developed countries operate to 8 to 10%. US, of course, being extreme at 18%. But we are at a point where thanks to the growing consuming class, thanks to the awareness which happened inadvertently because of COVID, we will see a lot of growth in healthcare, and this is here to stay. So if you take next 2 decades, 3 decades, one sector which you can say will have high single digit or early double digit growth will be healthcare, without doubt. We are seeing that happening, and we see this will sustain. I think government is also realizing it's a very, very important space, right? And it's suddenly become a political subject, social subject. So we'll see a lot of action happening from the government as well. This is now top of the priority for a lot of folks, which is also going to add to investment which is happening in the sector. And the other thing, at least I'm seeing in healthcare, Prof, to your question, there's a lot of digital. I think, again, digital plays a big role, but healthcare will always be, at least I believe, omni-channel, right? You will have a physical, you'll have a digital, but it will become more and more seamless. And while healthcare historically has been organized around people who can provide, because doctors were always short, it is moving more and more patient-centric, right? And like any other sector, like FMCG will always see consumer at the center. Same journey we're seeing is happening in healthcare as well. Right? Till now, it was designed around the stakeholders because they were in paucity. It is moving more and more closer to the patient, and patient is really at the center of it. And also, at least I am witnessing, we have pharma, medtech, diagnostic, hospital. I think the boundaries also blurring. I think we'll see more and more integration happening around different fields, because you know what? In 10 years from now, 2/3 of people will actually have chronic diseases, right? It's always the single largest cause of death in India already. And with chronic disease, you live for 30, 40 years with them. You cannot only survive on pills. You need to have some intervention, some behavioral change, some wellness, some pharma. So it is getting more and more integrated, and we'll see that play out as we go forward. And I think the other thing I'm seeing is, if you look at globally and not only in India, a lot of new players are looking at the sector and say, hey, this is something where a lot of action happening. If you look at what Amazon is doing, what Google is doing, what Apple is doing, healthcare will see a lot more action and people getting in it, because this is important for people. This is going to be high growth. I think one advice for all of us, all of the people present and the students, look, I at least never decided that I want to be healthcare. I came here over here, but I think I did realize when I look back on my batchmates, healthcare was not the most attractive sector or what most aspirational sector at those times. I don't know if that's changed on campus or not, but at least I think suggestion I would follow of you is just be more aware, just understand what's happening out there. And again, it's not a very different sector. I think a lot of innovations, disruptions happening in supply chain, tech, consumer, all are getting really filtering in healthcare. It's fair, right? But someone who can understand a bit of healthcare and bring a lot of innovation is really what the industry needs, right? So I think keeping your mind very, very open and thinking what's happening in healthcare, what are the opportunities, I think that would be one big suggestion I would have for all of you, right? As you think about your career choices that you make. And I think I also from a firm believer that you can not overplan your career. I think destiny will take different turns. You have to a bit beyond a point, flow with the flow. But once you get there, ensure that you have hunger, you have hustle, you have humility, and you have the honesty, right? I think at least that's what I followed all my life. And if you put all the right things in place and follow these things take for care, and it's a sector which is going to grow in a market like India. It is a great place to be at this time of the year or this time of the century, I would say. Let me pause here.
I think there's a good point to thanks, Chirag. I think there's a good point to ask you questions. So, anything popping up in your mind? Yeah.
You kind of briefly touched upon this idea of non-patient customers in healthcare. You mentioned Fitbit over there. So like a lot of these things that are developing about like self-care that is growing among people who don't really have a disease but want to take care of their health, you're not really seeing like involvement of the traditional healthcare sector that you associate being involved in this particular arena. Fitbit, for example, you at least like so like when you say that these arenas are growing, are you saying that the traditional healthcare firms they want to enter this arena, or are they expanding of what constitutes the healthcare sector? I guess.
See, what's really happening these days is that, as Chirag also mentioned, the landscape is so rapidly evolving. And in the last 2 years of COVID, we have seen competitive intensity in diagnostics going up so much We have players like Pharmacy, 1mg, and then now NetMed's there, so e-pharmacy, there's a full stack model coming in. All these guys are just doing so many things, right? Often investors actually ask me this question, is that how your days are numbered and what are you guys going to do, because e-pharmacy will take away entire diagnostic business, party's over. So it's just the landscape which is evolving very fast. What I'm seeing is that there are two parts to healthcare. One is the serious traditional healthcare, as you mentioned, much more governed through regulation. One of the reasons why innovations are not so common in healthcare is because you have to undergo a lot of regulatory approvals, etc. And you don't really get commercialization of many new ideas that actually exist. COVID vaccine was an exception because it probably was a need, otherwise in normal course COVID, any vaccine would take 10 years. What's really happening because of this technology evolution, a lot of these home-based stuff that are coming in. One of the things, idea that's really coming up, let's say take the example of diagnostics. If we want to go deeper into diagnostics and continue to really create a differentiation in our core, one thing could be that, let's say example of diabetes. Diabetes is that person comes to me once a week, once in 2 weeks, but probably at home through that glucometer is probably testing very frequently. The same person is also checking his or her blood pressure at home, may not be recording it in some, let's say, record. So if I can actually connect those data points through technology, it probably goes into some kind of app. And then that person once in a month, once in 3 months comes to me for testing. I probably may have a profile of test where there is a serious side of healthcare, which is my lab test, but there are also lifestyle related stuff that has been happening around that person on a real-time basis. And maybe my output will look very different. Because there could be, let's say, if I have 10,000 steps every day, you don't need to check it, but let's say you come for a test, saying that, okay, now you'll be having these 10,000 steps per day for the last 3 months. Now your sugar level looks like this, your thyroid profile looks like this, or your lipid profile looks like this. There would be a linkage between the two. So a lot of these new products which you can probably design through some algorithms, that's what I probably meant by that's going beyond just traditional form of testing. I don't know about hospital side, something like that, since you are on the OT side of hospitals or something, but in diagnostics, I believe there's something like that.
I'll tell you, maybe if I can add to I think on pharma, by the way, pharma traditionally have been making medicines. We are working with one pharma company who's very big in cardiac and diabetes. And they are saying, if I have to treat my patients well, medicines are not enough. Unless the person controls the diet, get the testing done regularly, is able to control exercises. So they are now actually coming up with a digital therapeutic to aid their medicines and saying that if you know what, if a doctor has to write my medicine, please add this digital therapeutic product along with it. Because unless you change your lifestyle, medicine alone is not enough. So I think that, to your point, is exactly that amalgamation of classic medicine with the new form to get better outcome and get patient or consumer more healthier.
Actually, just help me remember something. There's a startup by the name Shift. It's just started by a co-founder of Zomato, and he came and met me about 3-4 weeks back. He's exactly doing the same thing. So he's saying, listen, I am collaborating with a doctor who has got only 5 minutes to spare for his or patient, but actually requires that patient is at a loss. Doctor has just said that you require this diet, this plan, that plan, do this yoga, all that stuff, but this is the medicine. Now, doctor is in a hurry to see the next patient. But that balance 25 minutes which is required to take care of the patient, that's what the goal is. Now, he's not a doctor. He's a co-founder, IIT engineer or something, started this company by the name Shift. Now, he's saying in my scheme of things, in my proposition, there is also diagnostic, which I'm not a diagnostic lab. So I want you to partner with me. But I have a holistic solution to take care of diabetes of a person. So he is saying I'm a lifestyle manager or a health manager for a patient of diabetes. So a lot of such interventions are really coming in. These are all healthcare initiatives, but run by non-healthcare people.
Thanks, sir. Want to
good evening. I'm Dr. Akanksha. So I have a question for Meenakshi ma'am. So ma'am, like the non-pharma healthcare industries like medical insurance or the medical technology industries you said. So what are the major challenges we are facing right now which if taken care of will actually help these industries to go at an accelerated pace?
Okay, Dr. Akanksha, great question. I think, to be honest, it's very similar as in pharma. So if I look at medical technology, firstly, the growth is exponential. Like for us, 20-25% year-on-year growth is what it should be at least. Because the government is investing a lot of money in infrastructure. Private hospitals are growing like crazy. They've all made a lot of profits during COVID, and so they're putting it all back into capital investment, greenfield investment, brownfield. So actually the market is really buoyant. I mean, we were talking about how was last year. So yeah, it was a very bad COVID year, but strangely our business grew really well, and same as this year. So the business growth for all companies, medtech, pharma, I mean, the growth is really there. I think we have a lot of, definitely there are challenges, right? So I think, but if I look at what could really transform for us, for example, the first is that the market has absolutely got the appetite for cutting edge technology. Like we used to think, and I'm speaking about my company, is that we need to make products in India for India. And that's possibly true. But now we've brought our 3 best technologies. One is an orthopedic robot, one is this camera which lights up, which is we call it fluorescence imaging, but it gives you the innards in a lit up way. So let's say an oncology surgery, you can dissect the tumor completely because the color of the screen is dark red versus less dark red versus less dark red. And our third is a mobile CT where you can take in OR imaging, 72 slice imaging on a second by second basis. So I get very excited by it, you don't have to because this is my business. But the point I'm trying to make is for these 3 technologies, absolutely the market is there in India. If you walk into an AIMS Delhi, which if you look outside AIMS Delhi, you will think, my God, I would never bring my mother to this hospital. If you look inside the OT of AIMS Delhi, they have by far the best technology in the country. And that goes for many of our government hospitals. So what I'm trying to say is the technology hunger, whether it's teaching hospitals, whether it's corporate hospitals, whether it's a single surgeon-owned private hospital, the hunger for new technology to treat patients better, faster, safer, cheaper is absolutely there. So really the first challenge is how do we bring this technology into the country as quickly as possible. We have to make it affordable, but it has to come as quickly as possible. The second is training and education. You would have heard a lot of noise in the newspaper about ventilators available all over the country not being used. And this is then our responsibility, that when we bring this new technology, we need to make sure everybody is trained to use it. By that I mean the surgeon, the nurse, the paramedic, the radiologist, everybody needs to be trained, and only then can we launch the technology. Otherwise we're doing a huge disservice because they just keep lying around, and that was the issue with the ventilators. So that training and education is extremely important. And the third thing in our industry, which as a responsible healthcare company we have to do, is the tracking of adverse events, side effects, because things can go wrong. Like in a surgery, things can go wrong in anything. And so that is where responsible companies distinguish themselves from maybe less responsible companies, in terms of side effect monitoring, adverse monitoring. Those are the things that really keep us at night. So my worry is not how will I hit my budget. I know I will. My worry is not that will I be able to meet the expectations of this 20-25% growth that comes from global organizations, right? My worry is not that do I have products good enough. I mean, we absolutely do. But where we worry is, how it's being used. Is it used for the right patients? Is it used by the right surgeon? Will it cause any adverse effects? What happens? Do I have reporting systems in place that will tell me immediately? So those are the kinds of things that keep us awake. So I'd say that's really the only thing that freaks me out is the responsibility that comes with being in a life-saving business. And I actually find it quite exciting, but it can be a little bit stressful. But nothing else. The growth is there. It's a very buoyant market and a huge hunger for technology in this country. It's just been quite eye-opening for me how much people want good technology for their patients. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jaya, PGP2 student. So my question is primarily related to career choices and primarily for Meenakshi and Chirag. Like you rightly mentioned, like the opportunities available on the campus and as you mentioned at your time also McKinsey and these firms that still kind of stays true. And like you had a trajectory where you discovered your passion in healthcare in McKinsey and then chose to leave and go into, as you mentioned, pharma and medtech. And Chirag, you have chosen to stay in consulting. So my question is like, once given like the kind of opportunities on campus, I mean it's very natural that in the initial choices are pretty clear, but at each and every stage of your career on a regular basis, how do you evaluate these opportunities? Like whether I want to continue in consulting in healthcare or whether if like in private equity or in a pharma or medtech space, how to evaluate those decisions? Because as all of the panelists mentioned that this is a growing sector. But then how to evaluate for oneself to make those career choices, which is the right place to make that switch, even in the startup space or established conglomerate space or the services space. What factors to keep in mind when evaluating for oneself? Like I agree to Chirag that it's not a planned thing, but when that evaluation is going on, how do we make those decisions? What factors to keep in mind?
I'm happy to Meenakshi. I'll let you start.
Okay, so I guess it's a tough one, no? Because if you asked me if I could go back in time, 25 years when I was on campus, or 27 years actually, would I make the same choice? Would I join McKinsey, or if there was a healthcare company, would I join them? And my answer would probably be, because I did not really know what I want, I would have probably still gone down the McKinsey or banking or something, because I was not clear that this is what I wanted. And in a way that gave me the choice to figure it out. So that would be the honest answer. But if you ask me that, do I feel like I made the right choice by coming to healthcare? And absolutely yes. And do I wish I had made it even earlier? Probably yes. So I don't know how exactly, because for each person the choice is different. But I think maybe either Om said it or Chirag said it, that one is the industry you join. As long as it's a high growth industry which will give you a chance to learn, you can't really go wrong. So at least in my time in McKinsey, I don't know how it is now, but there was one of our most successful partners, his name is Leo Puri. He was in the industry and then he joined McKinsey in a lateral way, and now he's probably one of the most successful financial institution partners McKinsey India ever had. So there is it's not like it's a one-way street that you join this and then you're stuck there. There are many ways to grow beyond that. If you don't like what you're doing, you can always change. But I think the first question is, how broad or how deep do you want to go, right? So if you feel like you've explored the world and now you're ready to decide, go for the specialization. There's no reason to postpone it. But if you want to explore more or you're not sure, and if you get an option which gives you a few more exploration hours, it's worth it. I guess that would be one simple way to look at a career choice. The second, which I tell everybody on a personal basis as well, is sometimes more important than the industry you join is the company you join. And the kind of training, discipline, values, business ethos you learn in that company will stay with you forever. So I've had the privilege of working with 3 very good companies. And I feel like the habits it's taught me, the way it's taught me to make decisions, the way it's taught me to keep one or two things central to every decision, not to get distracted, not to take shortcuts, not to cut corners. Those are far more important in my life than what position I have, what career I have, and so on. So the company choice becomes really important as well. So I think it's a combination of general versus special, how much you explored yourself, and the second is the choice of the company. Yeah. But Chirag, over to you.
No, I think fully agree with what Meenakshi said. I'll tell you my story. Right? When I came to campus after medicine, I think investment banking was, and sorry for use the word, was a sexy thing in the time, right? Before the recession. And I was so sure I want to do investment banking, right? Because that's what you hear about in all the news, right? I got multiple shortlists, I converted 0. And I think I remember from that day 0, I went to, at that time, HUL for some reason used to be day 2, right? It was a very, very harrowing experience. Ended up doing marketing from doing finance. Ended up doing marketing, had an amazing time, had a PPO. In finals, McKinsey happened. I just could not say no to it, and I went with it, right? So look, I think initially I would say, right, you have some idea, but I would say also it's function of choices. Keep an open mind to begin with. And eventually, look, I would imagine most of you would be around 25, 30, right? So you'll have literally 35, 30 years of your corporate career ahead of you. It's a long time, right? First job is important, but it's really, I think, what you do in the job, what you learn, what choices you make, which is really going to make a big difference. And at least in McKinsey, it's not that I've decided I want to be a career consultant. I've thought of leaving McKinsey many times. And at least I give myself every 2 years to make the decision, and I look at, am I learning something which is really going to keep me relevant? That's one. Second, am I enjoying? I think there's no point doing something which you don't enjoy, because again, life is too short. You'll end up spending 1/3 of your life in your office or with your work professional colleagues, if not more. They should not be stressed. I think stress is fine, but the job is something, at least I didn't want to take stress on an ongoing basis. And something, last thing I said, you should feel inspired. And whatever you're doing, you should feel inspiration. Inspiration can come from your colleagues, from your mentors, from the clients, from the work, from the problem you're trying to solve, from your employees. But every 2 years, I do take this barometer, internal barometer, say, is McKinsey the best place for me to be? Or even within McKinsey, by the way, I got elected partner 5 years back. For the first 2 years, I really spent on public health. I said, I've done enough. Let me focus on public health. That's what really want to really keep me excited. And then after that, I now really focus on digital health, right? So even outside, within the company or a different company, keep this barometer. And I think the world is in a massive flux, right? We don't know how the world will be 10 years from now. Who knows? But as long as you have this internal constant checkpoint and you are constantly evaluating your learning objectives, your life objectives, and then at least that's how I've decided every 2 years to stay in McKinsey or explore outside.
The big advantage of being who you are, being from IIMA, right? Having the training, the skills, the education that you have. I mean, if you mess up, you make a wrong decision, what happens? Nothing happens. Right? 6 months later, you decide, well, I think I made a wrong decision. Or a year later, you decide to make a wrong decision and you correct it. And is it, for anyone, is it going to be a disaster? No, you're personally going to be fine, right? You still have, most of you are very young. You have how many decades of experience ahead of you. And if you experimented for a year or 2 years, what does it matter? I mean, consequences are going to be very limited. So that's what I have perspective.
That point, but we're evaluating CVs of people, right, who apply for jobs. And if somebody has tried something, failed miserably, and wants to come back to work, I absolutely love it, because they had the risk appetite to try something completely different. They had the audacity to know that they were failing, and now they've come back, and probably in those 2 years where they think they failed, they probably learned much more than they would have if they had the cushy job with any other company, right? So when we are sitting on the other side evaluating CVs, yes, we don't want people to move every 1 year and constantly moving jobs, not settling down. That's not the profile I'm talking about. But someone who's tried something, did not either like it or failed in it, and then wanted to do something completely different. I don't think any of us now see those CVs as, oh my God, this is not someone. In fact, it's very intriguing to meet such people, because you have the guts to try, you have the brains to know when it was working, and you've now come back with renewed energy, right? So don't think of people seeing your CV as, it's not a blemish, it's actually a spark potential.
Maybe I just want to add one more thing. I think it's a good point which she made. But out of this 5,000 people, we have probably recruited 3,000. And one of the things that, in fact, I attribute our success to the diverse talent that we've hired. And my sense is that most companies are not looking for a person from the same industry, because you are looking for fresh ideas. So I think one of the myths that the notion that we carry is that once you are stuck with industry, you can't change. I don't think it's true anymore, because people are looking for diverse talent. In fact, these days in diagnostics, I have a lot of talent coming from telecom industry. So that is the talent that suits the kind of work that I do inside. While I am a medical company, but inside systems and those are best suited for a guy from a telecom industry as well as my company. So I think many companies are looking for diverse talent.
So question 1, 3, and
Hi, I am Manchanda. I am a PGP1 here. My question is specifically for Devdutt and Dr. Shailesh. So, it's a bit of a nested question. I've been a part of around 4 or 5 private equity transactions in healthcare in the last 2.5 years. So from the commercial diligence side. And my personal observation was that 3 out of those 5 transactions, the funds were trying to set up a platform that was going to invest in multiple companies in the same value chain. And so my question is that really a practice that is going on in the industry, and is there an opportunity for a generalist person, a non-engineer like me, to become a part of investing in healthcare in a private equity fund in that perspective?
I think the answer goes back to what Meenakshi said, that the industry has been so fragmented, and it's clear that economies of scale exist, whether it's an API or in the industry that's seen platform being created. And so it's not a surprise that somebody put those two things together and said, look, I'll find a company, I'll find a strong manager management team, put them together. By the way, I can buy 4 other things, make it even bigger. And 1 plus 1 plus 1 doesn't make 3, it makes 4.5. That's why it creates value, right? So I think the industrial logic for why it's happening is pretty sound in the sector it's happening in. And it's not a surprise that it's happening at all. And if you see the examples, by and large, have been quite value creative for the investors that invested in it, right? So, I mean, to answer your second question, there's no really entry barrier in the sense of you need to have a specific type of degree to be private equity. Answer is no. I mean, my boss was an economist, my other boss was an accountant, I'm an engineer. I work with colleagues who are arts graduates. It's really about being curious about that industry, or really sort of finding what's the way for me to enter it, if you really want to enter it. And seeing whether you like it or not, and making a choice whether that's like path you forward. Because we all have this idea from the outside that some industries are more glamorous than others. Frankly, I think we need to be a bit more open-minded about it than having that outsider's bias and see what it is like on the inside. So I wouldn't take away that there is, there isn't sort of a particular type of CV we're looking for, if that's what your question was. But we're looking for people who are immediately curious about industries and are really analytical and want to apply themselves to sort of complex work.
No, thank you, David. I'll just quickly add to this. I work with 2 private equities. One is Goldman Sachs, the other one is Adatia. And what I've done see is that, I was working with Nevatia in his previous avatar, the young people like you who come into this, who have no background of healthcare, immediately rely on being curious to understand from a person like me, who has spent a lifetime in this, to really get into a certain amount of domain knowledge. But the value that you bring in terms of questioning, the rationality, the financial discipline, the ability to analyze to see whether this is sustainable business or not, is invaluable. You don't have to be a part of the healthcare system to have, or something that you have studied in your graduate level to be able to contribute in this. Today you are able to do this through people who are available, who have got experience on this. But I think very quickly you grasp things because you have that ability of learnability. So what I've seen of late is that we work with multiple opportunities of creating platforms. Now, for example, very recently we have acquired a company which is a 250 crore company, relatively small company, entirely dedicated to nutraceuticals, which is wellness platform. The idea is to create India's the most admired wellness company. That's the vision statement. Now, private equity has invested. No pure play company exists in India. There are a number of pharma companies who dabble into wellness. But pure play nutraceutical company who believes in from birth to adolescent to adulthood to old age, that you are able to provide the right level of nutrition to a population of India would be a great thing to do. Now, we started with this. Now we're going to have a possible acquisition of a company which provides a very different model of supply chain to the dermatologists in the country or people who are skin specialists of a specific medication. We are thinking that we'll acquire that business because it really adds on to the mission statement that we have. Similarly, there are a number of such opportunities which are coming up. So as long as you have that vision to create the platform which will build on your initial investment, it can become an extremely exciting journey. And in that every stage, colleagues like you can play a very major role. So believe me, you really don't have to be worried that you don't have the basic, let's say, healthcare degree per se. That's now no longer an absolute necessity. You will learn it as soon as once. I remember how much time he really literally, called me at every time to say, Shailesh, can you tell me a little bit more about what this happens? I know a guy in Goldman Sachs, again our IIMA, alumnus. He calls me and said, can you just take me through the whole drug development steps? How do the drugs are developed? How do you do clinical trial? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. What are these terminologies? Can you explain to me? Take walk for me, but for him it was a completely new thing. But then, inquisitiveness and wanting to learn, he's able to then make the right contribution in the discussions that you have. So that would be the way to approach.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this session actually. I'm an engineer by background. So basically from the consumer end, Mr. Ram was telling that the product comes as a consumer oriented. So if we see in Western countries now health is paramount concern. But here in rural India, still that awareness is not there. Thanks to COVID, few awareness is created. But how are we going to encounter the challenges? So many people have the thought process MNC-based this health services or costly affair. So how is being tackled? I just wanted to know.
So I think when we say healthcare is a growing sector, it essentially means that healthcare is now moving from metros, large cities to tier 2, tier 3 towns. And in fact, in our portfolio, the fastest growing markets are states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Odisha, Jharkhand. Now these states or these towns are never actually in the news all the time. You go to Varanasi, such a large hub for us. You go to Meerut, such a large hub for us. Which clearly means that there is tier 2, tier 3 towns where now the opportunity is just surfacing. And primary reason for that is very simple. It is a very macro. India is such a 1.3 billion people, fastest growing economy, has to spend on healthcare. That's the basic need for all of us, right? And the second thing is, compared to Western world versus us, it's 70% here is private healthcare. It actually is out of pocket. So the decision to which brand I want to avail my healthcare is very largely with the patient. There at least your insurance company is deciding. So this whole construct of the industry lends itself very well to like a consumer making a choice over the counter. That's where the whole consumerism is coming in healthcare. So opportunity is growing very, very aggressively in tier 2, tier 3 towns. And it's out of pocket, so you need to engage directly with the customer before they make choice which facility they want to go.
I think the main point many of us are trying to say to all of you is the attractiveness of being in a growth industry is that in your jobs you will have many degrees of freedom because we are creating markets, we can shape markets, we can create brands. There's a lot of room to do stuff. When it's a growth industry, there's just a lot of room to do things. It's no longer an FMCG or healthcare or, it's all of it, right? We do a lot of consumer stuff, we do a lot of infrastructure expansion, we do a lot of, thinking about the science behind it, we do a lot of consumer. So it's just, I think that's what it is, we're obviously biased, we're in healthcare, right? But any industry you go to, if it's a growth industry and if the company has a mindset to lead in that industry, you will have a good career. So I would say, don't stress too much about it, Just think about it. I want to be in a growth segment because with that I can grow. And I want to be with a company that really wants to make a difference. I think if you get those two right now, 99% of the time you'll be very successful. So we will make it sound a little bit too, intellectual. That's not our intention. I think that's the long and short of career values.
everyone, my name is Ayyangar and I'm a PGPA student. I had pharma background, in fact I was an ex-Sanofi. So when it comes to international players in Indian pharma industry, we have seen that they have been either laying off or consolidating their operations in India. So my question is to Dr. Shailesh, Ayyangar and Chirag, that how do you see future of MNCs in Indian market?
I'm sure Chirag has a lot to talk about this, but let me, because he's probably working with all the MNCs. But yes, we are on the crossroads as we speak now, because the focus of the multinational companies in general is very clearly on innovation, on new products, on specialty care. So they are looking at immuno-oncology, they are looking at monoclonal antibodies for some of the dreaded diseases, central nervous system, where they are looking at Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so on and so forth. So there's a huge focus of these companies to acquire boutique R&D companies, for example, in Boston area, to really then commercialize them through development into phase 3 trials and eventually bring it to the market. A personalized care, which is becoming more critical for MNCs. MNCs have also realized that they have, once the product goes into off-patent mode, the ability for them to support those brands and really compete against highly effective local companies getting more and more different. So they are making global choices to say where we want to actually operate, where we have chance to succeed. There are limited resources available. I would like to ensure that I put maximum resources behind where I have a chance to succeed. So that being the global mandate, many MNCs, for example, a country like India, there are a number of restrictions for us to really introduce global brands at the same time when they are launched in US, Japan, or in Europe. There are process has to go on through here, and eventually getting the right pricing, because ultimately there are huge investments that cost about $1 billion plus or $1.5 billion to actually bring a product, 10, 12, 15 years of R&D work before you can bring a molecule into the market. So these guys will not be able to compromise for one or two countries pricing which is dramatically different from what it is elsewhere in the patent life. So to that extent, markets like India would be very challenging for many MNCs. So while earlier, Sudarshan and I, for example, we had a long journey in MNCs so far, but today Indian companies are doing exceedingly well. They have gone into the value chain. Very recently, I'm on the board of a company in Pune which has developed India's first mRNA vaccine. Unthinkable for an Indian company to come up with an mRNA vaccine which is even better than Pfizer's vaccine, because this vaccine is stable at 2 to 7 degrees temperature, as against Pfizer's vaccine which is minus 70 degrees or 80 degrees you have to keep in liquid nitrogen. So innovation, Indian scientists are doing some terrific work. And as far as off-patent molecules are concerned, nobody can beat the local business acumen. They're able to do the life cycle management, they're able to bring combination drugs, all medically proven combinations. I'm not saying irrational combination, but medically proven combination. They're able to introduce in the country which MNCs are not able to do it. So there are two distinct, I would say, approaches to your choice of companies. You may choose to become a part of an MNC, but then you be a part of an MNC which is in specialty area. That's where you are going to grow. If you are going to be in the so-called established products, then it's a dying business for them, and that's going to be a tough one to go for. But maybe Chirag, you want to say things.
Dr. Shailesh, I think you covered it very well. You know the industry inside out. I think fully agree. I think companies are MNCs are very good in making new products, right? And I think unfortunately the pricing in India is fortunate or unfortunate, right? As a consumer, is a big benefit for us. One of the lowest price in pharma globally, right? So I think that's an advantage to us, but I think that does not work for all the R&D spend which goes. I think second thing is Dr. Shailesh said, right? I think the Indian companies have been very, very entrepreneurial, and I think globally, I think no other market has such a strong presence of local pharma companies as India has, right? And therefore, I think what I am seeing, most of the MNCs are saying that let me reduce my sales force and partner more and more with Indian companies, right? As a out license of the brand, first brand, second brand, third brand, and saying, I'll bring the innovation, but let me take the muscle of sales and marketing of the local company. And that is the best answer, right? Because you have the widest distribution, but also good products at a very competitive pricing. And I think that's why I think we do believe this will happen. I think MNC are not exiting, but they'll keep bringing innovation, but more in partnership with local players rather than competing in every part where they are not even strong in.
So, question. Hello, Dr. Shailesh. So I have a question for you. I was stuck with this point where you were mentioning about importance of mentoring. So there is either way of intuitively getting into a role and then working, finding out if we are fit or not. But then I like the point of view wherein a good mentor can actually guide us through in the right and fastest path. So like if you were say 30 years back, how would you have, if with the same knowledge, if you were 30 years back, how would you have chosen a mentor or to ask this question?
No, I think that is a great point, and it's not always very easy to know the boss you're going to work for. For me, it's very, very crucial in the early stage of shaping up your career, irrespective of which business you go into. Partly it is luck, partly you make a choice. I made a wrong choice to start with. I joined a company which I can mention the name because now that company no longer exists. But those days it was the #1 company in India. So after passing out from IIM, I went to National Dairy Development Board, and then I decided to go to industry. And my first job was in Rantaxi. Those days it was #1 company. And I happened to be posted in Hyderabad as the regional business manager. One of my trips to Vijayawada, which is one of my territories, I went there and I went to the distributor because it was month closing. I wanted to see what business we can get from the distributor. And when I went there, the distributor said, "Sir, come and have a cup of coffee or tea. You don't have to worry about business." I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, we had a call with your office in Devika Towers in Delhi, and they have given me 20% discount on all the products that you will purchase. We have already given the order to Delhi, so you don't have to worry, your target is done." I couldn't believe it. I came back to Hyderabad, I called up my boss. I said, "Why did you do this?" He said, "No, Shailesh, we had a pressure on sales, so we had to get this business. You are new to this territory." We just called him up and it's done, not to worry. I said, "Do you realize that next time when I go there, he will never believe me? He will always call you. So what do I do here?" He said, "Well, don't worry about it. This is the way we work." Next day I resigned from that company. And I didn't have a job in hand, so I had to start my own company. I started selling car mats and advertising in the newspapers on Deccan Herald, some of the things. What I'm trying to say is that it's very important that in any career you go, you've got to choose and then walk away if you find that it is actually hurting your values. If you don't keep those values straight, then it's really good. I was very fortunate. Next job I got after 4 or 5 months, I got it in Bangalore, the SmithKline region. Fabulous boss. I could never ever forget in my life. All my initial learnings were from the way in which he conducted, the humility with which he handled, the respect he gave to people. I mean, those early days of learning stayed with me every time and all my life. So it's very important, friends, that apart from money, you can get lots of money, everything else, but getting the right kind of support and value system is something that I would give a lot of value to your career choices.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Nevatia and I am part of the current PGPX batch. So my question is related to the digital health space. Right? So we know that the market exists for it in the Western world because of the value-based care model that we have. And in India, it's mostly risk-based model. So what are the kind of opportunities that we have in India for the digital health space? I primarily ask this question because in our PGPX batch, we have a lot of people with a lot of technology expertise and having worked in different industries would like to contribute to the healthcare and the digital health space particularly. So what are the kind of opportunities that exist now and maybe in the future as well for the healthcare?
I'm sure my panelists will say we are much more qualified, but I can only say this much: endless. Sky's the limit. The whole thing is dramatically changing. That's why healthcare is so exciting. I was just reading Alphabet, which is the parent of Google, is currently spending in last 2 years, between 2019 and 21, there were 100 investments they made. The 2/3 of their investment was entirely on healthcare, complete technology. Now, you're right, globally this is happening. In India, things are changing dramatically. Every day I sit in my organizations and the old way of just going and having a conversation with a doctor and selling model is changing. Now we are talking about reaching out to doctors through various digital initiatives. So that's one part of go-to-market strategy. But even in every other function that we talk about, digital is coming in massively. So the more, and one of the problems today, believe me, is our traditional companies do not have the skill sets to understand how to fathom this enormous opportunity that we have. Youngsters like you come in, and we need management institutes to recognize that the needs of the future is going to be more and more technology driven. And to that extent, course curriculum, everything else, whether it is human resource management, whether it is economics, finance, everywhere you would need to have more and more emphasis on digital awareness and technology and skill sets. So I for one feel that this is going to be, next 10 years is going to be nothing but that. But maybe my
No, I think you summarized the answer in the first word. It's endless. I think every part of the value chain we're seeing a lot happening on digital health. I'll just share one factor. I think healthcare is almost 20 to 25% of work McKinsey does in India, say 20%. Almost 70% of work that I am doing, and I can tell from my colleagues, actually is either linked to digital or analytics these days, right? 70% of all the work we're doing. And this is both new age startups or new age, but a lot of legacy companies saying, how do you use digital to either become better or getting into new businesses or new service lines which they could not imagine earlier because it was not present, right? So I think by the end of it, by the end of next 2 years, almost every company would have embraced digital analytics way ahead what they were, right? So it is here to stay. And I think to your question, I think even if you look at the West, right, I think Shailesh mentioned the example of Alphabet, right? But one of the largest PE funding is actually happening in the health tech space because the unmet need is very high. Healthcare has been a traditional laggard. Consumers want to use it. It's very important for consumers and for markets like US. Almost 20% of GDP is healthcare, right? So it's a big spending, growing bucket, a lot of unmet needs. So it's a classic place where something like a tech can really create a disruption. So right from online pharmacy, teleconsult that we all know about, right? But going to chronic disease management, how to do surgeries. I mean, what Meenakshi was talking about within the theater as well, right? That technology we don't talk about a lot. But every spectrum from primary to really quaternary care, technology is actually getting more and more embedded in healthcare.
Okay, great, awesome. So I think you get your answer that the possibilities in some ways are endless. In some ways, you have to think a lot. And the one aspect that I try to emphasize in my course is that healthcare is not an easy sector. Because ultimately, if you just want to make money, there are many other ways in which you can do it, right? So at some level, you also have to make a personal decision that you care for other people. And this is a great sector to be in if you actually make that decision. So you might be thinking in terms of your career. Remember that your career has consequences to you. And I think that's the feedback. Achieving your goals. I think that's in some ways what I find is the sheer impact and reach of everything. So I want to thank all of you. Thank you. Just share some moments with your family. So they will also get so on behalf of CMHS, my colleague, sorry, yeah. So my colleague Vishwanath, a member of the executive committee of CMHS. Right? Thank you, Om. So Om has been here since yesterday, right? Working and talking to all of the faculty as well as So the key thing is that the data is suggested in course at and maybe like very much in the works. So watch out if Professor Data is here.
Terrific audience. Thank you.
The two youngest members in the group. The person who initiated the process Chirag, so unfortunately, we just have to watch out for your career, right? You do have a life and we CMHS moment. Right? So thank you so much, Chirag, for joining us. It was tough for him. So even if you could spend all this time with us virtually. Thank you. So on behalf of CMHS,